So I'm a big fan of music that makes me run fast and question my own feminism.
Does that mean we have a Robin Thicke in there somewhere?
Genuinely, Blurred Lines used to be on the playlist, and then I was like, I can't.
There was a limit. There was a line.
There's a line. Yeah, it's a blurred line.
Hello and welcome to the Process Podcast. I will never do an intro. I will talk about how, like, it's been 20 plus episodes. I could have just cut this bit and gone straight into introducing my guest. I could do that. I'm able to. Hell, in the edit, I could have done that. But you're hearing this in the episode, so I haven't done that. But what you're also going to be hearing is I have got a wonderful guest to me who is, I'm going to say flown down. I know you haven't flown down, but flown down
with
all
my
the way.
wings.
Yes, with your wings. You've flown down. You yourself flew. There was no assist from any mechanical thing.
I'm very professional.
I didn't actually finish my point. Flew down from Edinburgh. I have a habit of doing that, starting to do a thing. And I've watched so many of these back when I've seen that I started making a point and that point is never delivered or finished. So yes, from Edinburgh by way of America, we have the wonderful Katie Ailes.
Hello.
How are we doing, Katie?
We're good. We're excited to be here. I always have a ball when I do podcasts with you.
There you go. I think our last podcast we did together, we were wearing matching wrestling shirts.
We were indeed. Oh, I should have reprised that. Oh, man.
Oh, the temptation to
lost.
Midway through this, there'll be a hard cut and then we'll be both in hustle wrestling shirts at one stage. I now have two of them. But despite the ever so slight wrestling talks, then what I like to start our podcast off with is how we first met each other. And I'm trying to think, because I feel like I met you at Fringe, not at Unislam.
I think so too. I think it would have been one of the Fringe, probably quite early on, like 2015, 16.
Oh yeah, because my memory of things is it was Unislam, it was back when it was just the one day Unislam.
Yep.
I met Kath and Doug.
Yep.
And Kath and Doug liked me enough that when you were doing Lad Poet, so like, we met this guy called Tyrone, he should come pretty much. And then it's been like, cool, and now you're not getting rid of me.
Never. No, yeah, I think it would have probably been, they probably would have met you at Unislam and then I would have seen you at Fringe back when, because like Banshee, back when everyone just hung out at Banshee. And
back when I actually did things at Fringe.
Yeah, that's maybe, yeah. Fringe has changed a lot, but yeah, back then it was very much that sort of community vibe. There were so many open mics at Fringe as well, which was so lovely. And like we had like the Boomerang open mic was going strong and lots of other ones. So yeah, that probably would have been when I met you.
Yeah, and
it's ages ago.
Obviously from that, then you would have come down to then do Unislam when you were doing your PhD, which we may talk about at some point.
That happened.
Yeah, because you were doing Unislam at the same time as that, which is why you got back on Team Edinburgh.
Yeah, well, I was Team Strathclyde.
No, so true.
I was Team. I don't know why I'm bright. We never won. Team Edinburgh won. Because I did my PhD at Strathclyde, and so we did Unislam one year, which was absolutely wonderful.
And then we're going to bring in a ringer. We're going to bring in Katie.
I don't know if I was a ringer. I don't really remember how it was scored, but I had a blast.
There you go.
That was a really fun team to be a part of. So yeah, lots of good stuff.
Well, yes, we're going to go into all of your. I'm phrasing this properly, Tyra. I'm going to go into all of your stuff. That sounds weird.
Please go through my stuff.
We're going to go through all of your stuff and all about you, as we're now going to go to our first section known as Timeline. So, timelines. I have, since doing a few of these, I've double checked it is Charles Dickens who I'm basing this off of in Ghosts of Christmas Past, Present and Future. I kept saying Charles Dickens and then kept going like, am I right?
You are correct. You are correct.
For all of the poetry literature stuff here, I'm bad at all of the literature. I don't know my authors and things.
I mean, it's easy to make. There's a lot of them. A lot of authors.
Not to mention, I want to say Mandela effect, but that thing of like when I'm so convinced of a thing and then I realize, I've just learned it wrong all of my life.
Oh gosh, I have so many of those. Yeah.
But thankfully, I do know this one, right? So going into your Ghost of Creative Past.
Just jangling
Yes.
chains with Marley and Marley.
That's exactly how it all started when we all got into our creative stuff. But obviously with that, so going into your background as a creative, as we were saying off camera, we all have so many hats. And like with that, you've also had the dancing background and as well as the poetry and many other things. So like, how did you become a creative, I guess?
I was born with a microphone in hand. No. Ow. Yeah, it's so funny to try to chart that because I feel like I was one of those creative little kids. I was always sort of making things and interested in doing art in various ways. And my parents have always been fantastic at really encouraging that. And I had some really wonderful teachers as well. So I can't remember when I would have started writing poetry, just doing it in school and stuff. And I got more and more interested in it as I went through sort of middle school and high school. But dance was really my big thing when I was younger. So I got put in ballet classes when I was 5. And that was just my passion. I loved it. And it was sort of, hour and a half a day, 3 hours some days, rehearsals on weekends. It was a sort of pre-professional training course. Some of the people who went to my school are professional dancers now. So it was quite intense and disciplined, as ballet can be, but also finding the creative freedom within that. So we got bits of choreography as well, which I really, really loved. And so for me growing up, I had these sort of two passions where I really enjoyed writing and sort of expressing myself through language. I loved reading poetry. I was a huge Sylvia Plath nerd, like I think many teenage girls are.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
teenage boy. I don't want to, don't want to gender it, but
I talked to enough poets that have mentioned a Plath era in their growing up. So yeah.
Which, and again, was really encouraged in that. My school, I still can't believe they did this. They gave me an independent study for a year where I just got to sit in the library and read everything she ever wrote, which was incredible. Also, 15 is an interesting age to be reading all of that and all of her journals and everything. But in any case, I loved writing and I loved dancing. But with writing, I got to play with language and I could be sort of literal and expressive and tell stories. And then with dance, it was physical and embodied. And then when I got to uni, I started playing with combining them. And I can't remember who would have first suggested it or whether it was an idea that I came to more naturally. But my dance teachers were like, hey, let's play with taking poems into the studio and what happens if you move a poem. And that was fantastic. And that's something that I'm still playing with. And at the same time, I saw some spoken word for the first time. So I saw Andrea Gibson and I saw Katie Wersing. They both visited my school, so I got to see them live.
And this was still in America?
Still in America, still when I was in uni. Yeah, I saw them and that sort of lit the fire. And then I studied abroad in Edinburgh in 2012, 12 years ago. And I went to open mics and slams at the University of Edinburgh where I was doing that term abroad. And it was like, flicking a switch. It was incredible just seeing all of this passion and how you could take language and embody it and really merge these things that I loved, but I had always sort of considered to be separate disciplines. And it was also really freeing because I was anonymous in the city. I was just I was 19, 20 doing this study abroad thing. No one knew who I was. So I could write about really personal stuff. I could share these stories that I never would have performed in front of my friends at home or in front of my family. But actually, I then had this new medium and this new audience. And it was incredible. So that really lit the fire. And because Edinburgh had been this safe, welcoming, creatively inspiring space, I was like, well, I know where I want to move after I graduate. And got a scholarship to do my master's and came back, and rest is history. Yeah.
Nice. And it's like with the dance stuff, like was dance ever a thought of like keeping that up vaguely professionally? Was dance always kind of like a nice hobby kind of thing?
It's so interesting. I don't think I ever, this is going to maybe sound sad, I don't think past a certain age, probably past 12, 13, 14 maybe, I let myself dream of being a full-time professional dancer. I wanted to when I was young, very, very much so. But ballet has a very particular body type. And it became evident that I did not have that body type. And certainly there were other forms of dance that I could have explored, but also, you know, technically I was not up with my peers. I was doing auditions for city ballet schools in Philly and DC, and I wasn't getting there. And I sort of had to make this choice because I loved school as well. And if you want to be a professional dancer, right, you generally, and you stay up with your schooling in other ways, but that has to become your passion and your focal point. And it is a young discipline. Like, you retire when you're 40 generally. So I sort of had that slow realization of, okay, I could fully commit to this, or I could continue to do it and continue to invest in it while also maintaining these other areas of my life that I love. And when I went to uni, I double majored. So I did both English and dance and did a minor degree in education. And amazingly have ended up finding paid work in all three, which God bless my parents. When I picked those things, they didn't push back. And I love them for it because it has paid off and it has served me well. But dance is a hard discipline, and it's a beautiful discipline, and I love it, and I miss it when I'm not doing it, and I feel very blessed that I have been able to come back to it in some capacity. But every time I do come back, it is tempting and natural to feel the loss of, oh, this does not work in the way that it used to. Whereas with poetry, the mind is a muscle, obviously, and if you take time away, it does take some to come back to it, but not the same as, oh, I used to have abs. Not sure they're there anymore.
Yeah, completely fair. And like, obviously, like we'll probably touch on the PhD stuff as we go on in this podcast. But like, obviously, there's so much of it was education based. So like, now with education, annoyingly for both of us, very far behind us. And all of that. Where is present day Katie? Because like, what are you doing at the moment creatively? And things we'll touch on, the spoilers for the rest of the podcast, but we will touch in on the collective work, which is now more than a collective, not a, I don't even know, but we'll touch in on Loud Poets. And for those playing at home, you can play how long Tyrone mentions Loud Poets, because it's so many different podcast things. I'm like, oh yeah, Loud Poets doing something or something like this. Yeah, so where are you at the moment with all of the creativity?
Because I wrapped my PhD during the pandemic, which was a really interesting and odd time. I still sometimes feel like I'm like, did I do that? Did I finish it? And I think like so many creative people, I've sort of, to make an income, you end up grabbing from different pies, and you end up finding the work that is both going to fulfill you and is going to pay the bills. And I feel very lucky that the work that I've chosen does both. So a lot of my work these days is more around production and administration, is working with Loud Poets, with I Am Loud, to facilitate opportunities for others. So it's putting on shows, it's facilitating workshops, it's, creating digital content and all of that, which is creative in many ways. But yeah, I think in many ways I've been thinking about this quite a lot lately, about the pattern that it's very easy to fall into, where actually that sort of work becomes the bulk of what you're doing, and actually writing your own poetry or moving or investing in your own creativity can sometimes take a back seat. So that being said, I have still done loads of creative stuff. I've been writing. I have ideas for things that I want to create in future. I've carried on with the dance, which has been great. I've had a few really wonderful opportunities. The Scottish Storytelling Centre, Dan Abercrombie, who's the program manager there, asked me to create a dance poetry piece a couple of years ago. because he knew that dance was something that I had done. And I was like, my first reaction was like, oh God, I need to get in shape. But it was the best thing anyone could have done for me, because actually I made that piece and it was such a wonderful experience and so rewarding to be back doing that sort of cross-disciplinary work. I got a commission later that year from Push the Boat Out Festival to again be doing dance and poetry work. So I've carried on with that. And I keep playing with poetry and performance. And I feel like my writing style has continued to evolve. I've been trying to write comedy stuff with maybe varying levels of success.
I mean, I will definitely pick up on that in a second, but like there is that thing of like finding that balance is hard, and like my not weird. I am very aware that, especially given my life, finding that balance has been easy because I've got the full-time job, so I've got that stability. But that is the thing, because I've got that thing stable, the creative stuff can be as chaotic or not even, I was going to say haphazard. It's not haphazard, but
there's less pressure on it.
Yeah. There's less pressure on it, and I can pick and choose a bit better and not have to worry about like, but I do need to make money now. So I need to say yes to the next commission that comes through, even if I don't fully align with it, or even if I'm going to be like, this is not my best bit of writing, but you need something by Friday. So here's the thing. Yeah,
exactly. And I think as well, so much of creative work, and certainly in your own practice, is speculative. So if I'm looking at what I have on my docket for a week and I'm like, okay, well, I could speculatively do the R&D for this solo show that I've been wanting to do for years, or I could reply to my emails and get the work done that's gonna actually sustain, me living here. But then you get into a pattern of that. And I should say, I mean, it's not either or. Like, I feel incredibly grateful to be working through this, again, collective company now of poets, and doing this sort of production work, because that in turn gives opportunities. I meet so many people. I get to tour all over the place. I have this incredible community that I work with. We have a YouTube channel. So if I create something, I know that I then have the means to distribute it. So it's not as though one takes from each other. They absolutely feed each other in this really, really valuable way. And I think this is, it's not limited to spoken word. It's for all artists. It's about finding the balance and identifying what you want out of your creative career and what those sort of proportions should be.
Well, like probably next one's going to transition into the future stuff, but because I wanted to go back on the comedy, like, are we looking for like writing comedic poems, or like probably like what is the comedy thing, and with that as well, like as we go into the future, like, what are we looking to do creatively for the future? Like, I think for the ease of things, we can say the collective talk future stuff for that next section. But like for you in particular, obviously you mentioned solo show and other stuff. So like, what is the future? Is it stand-up comedy comedian Katie Ailes?
I don't think anyone needs me to be a stand-up. So that more came out of sort of the realization that, and I think it's a really common path. I started very confessionally. It was a lot of work that was deeply rooted in my own experiences, in my own identity, in difficulties and joys, love poetry, all of that, right? And it was, I don't want to say like all dark necessarily, but it kept that sort of tone broadly. And I didn't have experience, or I felt skill in trying to play with the more comedic range and the more joyous range. I remember in the early days of touring Loud Poets shows, sort of 2015, 16, when we used to do these shows with not narrative arcs, but emotional arcs, right? And you want to sort of start funny and then go to more issues based. And then you have your low point of the show emotionally, and then you end with hope, right? And we would all sort of sit down in a room and pool our poems and be like, okay, what would slot in where? And I remember them being like, all right, so Katie, what's your funny poem? And I'd be like, oh, the one about my donor dad, because it starts with a joke, but then it goes down. So I didn't really have anything in that range. And so as I've been sort of developing as an artist, thinking about actually how can I create work that is going to have range. So I've been starting to play with that a little bit more, and I think a lot of that comes from watching peers who do have that sort of talent with audience engagement, with comedic timing, and all of that. And you're gonna fall on your arse a lot before you ever make it.
In my experience, and this is where I think there's an interesting interesting discussion to be had, not for today, but like there is that line between comedic poetry and comedy, and like
exactly.
So I had done in the past a lot of stand-up and slam with Dan Simpson.
Yeah.
And it was always fun doing that bill because in the poetry world, I'm arguably a relatively comedic poet.
Yeah.
I will do stand-up and slam and forget how, there was still a serious undercurrent in the poem and like, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm being the serious person tonight. And like, it was working in those spaces, thankfully, but that balance between there are some funny elements in this too. Is this a funny poem? Like I've got my mum poem, which has a lot of funny elements to it, but it also has, and I have not been a great son and let her down, etc. kind of thing. So is it funny? Is it just amusing and entertaining? And where is that balance? But no, it is a thing that, I mean, you look at how many slams and like, you've got to have a funny poem in one round, a serious poem in another round, and all that.
And I'm like, what the heck is my first round poem? Like, and I think it's that because it's not that I'm looking to do comedy or to make, change my persona of what I write about, but it's just looking to develop comfort using that full range. I think, interestingly, hosting has helped me with that because hosting is such an art form in and of itself. I think often people assume, anyone can host a show. And you're like, you go to one show with a bad host and you realize that is not the case. It's a real skill to have that ability to interface with an audience and to change the energy in the room. And one of the joys, again, about, working with a larger group of people is that we all at different points fill different roles, whether it's because we want to, or, maybe someone's ill and so you fill in and stuff. And through hosting, I've sort of gained that confidence and gained sort of that onstage hosting persona who is batshit crazy is my hosting persona. But, gotten more comfortable with being silly or with engaging in the audience in a different kind of way. So, yeah.
I had Rick Dove over for an interview the other day and we were talking about open mics in general, and we came up to the topic of hosting, and like he was describing what me and Kayla do, also what Ellie DeSache does for her night everything, where we're that wonderful level of chaos but still professional.
It's that though. It's that exactly, because you want the audience to be entertained and engaged, but never feel like it's gone off the rails. Yeah.
Like we will have our jokes. Like I admire how far Jake has come with his hosting, because there's always that line, like, especially when I first met Jake, the joke was Jake will go on a tangent, but sometimes the tangents would be that little bit too long when it's like, you're still running a night, Jake.
Yeah.
And like, I was aware that especially with the Boomerang crew, I defaulted to the straight man role a lot of the time, which I think was nice to have. That you need, again, I was talking to Kid, too many tangents type. I was talking to Kid and Nancy on this podcast a couple of episodes ago, where we were talking about hosting and the idea of like the comedy duo, etc. Having hosting duos and having someone to bounce off of, etc. And with that, having this person is allowed to go a bit crazier because then I can rein it in and we can have that fun antagonistic duo act, which is never actually antagonistic. But no, there is a lot of comedy in the hosting. You learn a lot of your improv skills and realize you can bring that into the poetry and performing skills, but going to finish the whole section off then into your future.
Yeah.
Other than writing some comedic poems, what else are we looking to do future-wise for Katie?
Yeah. I've had all of these ideas that keep getting pushed. I think a lot of that was sort of pandemic stuff and pivoting what I'm doing. One idea that I really want to do at some point is I want to get to the point where I'm doing a solo show. And I have a couple of very closely intersecting ideas of what that might be and the extent to which that would be poetry and storytelling, whether I would incorporate dance or maybe have that be a separate show. So much of my work has explored themes of sort of fertility and birth and belonging and identity I'm a donor conceived person, and that is something that I have explored a little bit in my writing. And I think particularly as we are in this climate right now where issues of reproduction and bodily autonomy are so present in the news, I've been thinking a lot about, okay, is there a show there? And I mean, I feel my 50-page draft of what this show is would say that there is a show there. So I'm sort of at the point now of going, okay, how do I get to a point where I can prioritize myself and my own creativity to actually start developing this show or a similar show? Because I think that would be a big creative challenge. Most of my work has been set work, has been individual poems, and to sustain a performance and a narrative and do the memorization that it takes for a one-person show is an incredible achievement. I am constantly in awe of anyone who brings a solo show to Fringe. And it's been something that I've wanted to do for a long time. So I'm, working up to that. Also thinking about, print publication. And the last time that I published a pamphlet was 9 years ago. I've done work in anthologies since then, but haven't sort of created my own collection since then. So yeah, lots of different ideas, things. I've got some cine poetry ideas. Just need to boot up the arse to actually do it.
No, like it is again, it's a nice kind of thing of like the sound of it is that vibe of there's no like I must do this or I'm failing kind of
yeah. And again, it's why I feel so lucky to work with a group and with a community, because I feel as though as soon as I do that, I'm like, oh well, we've got a venue who we usually work with. I've got folk who have experience with directing, with devising. I know who I would get to film it, right? Like I've got this whole community. So I feel, very, very lucky to have all of that sort of privilege. And it's just then making that shift to, doing things myself. I also, the other thing that I've loved recently is I head up our education and development programming. And we've been increasingly doing workshops with a lot of different schools and organizations. And so a lot of my passion lies there as well, because I feel like that's the perfect nexus between this production work, where you're still facilitating opportunities for other people and growing the scene and growing the community. But I love teaching. I love it so much. And it is a creative pursuit, and coming up with writing prompts and, getting to share poems with people and be like, all right, what do we think of that? And let's get inspired and let's write today. Continuing to do more and more of that is hopefully in my future.
Nice. Well, as you kind of have already started to allude to the bigger collective, we can now go into our next section called Let's Talk About. We're going into our Let's Talk About section, where we're going to pick a topic to talk about, and as conversations go, and as you heard in that last section, tangents will happen. That's what we're going to be doing, but we're going to be focusing in on overall is the idea of collectives, but obviously using Loud Poets, I Am Loud as the kind of basis for this. With that, I know obviously it's changed from the collective it started off as. So where is I Am Loud today? / where is Loud Poets today? And also, what is the distinction between the two of them?
God, yeah. I feel like so many people get confused there. So basically, the potted history, I suppose. So in 2014, a group of folk came together and started organizing, and late 2013 technically, and then the first show was February 2014, and it was a group of poets, but also actors and musicians, people who were interested in creative writing and performance in a number of different ways. And the thing that inspired it was the recognition that Edinburgh is this incredible literary city. Scotland has this amazing respect for poetry, and we've got Burns Night, we've got a national bard, Parliament is covered in poems and all of that. And there was a scene at the time for open mics for reading your poems, and obviously a lot of opportunities for publishing your poems. But what was less present at that point was a dynamic performance poetry scene and sort of a slam scene and a spoken word scene. There were some folk who were doing it. I certainly don't want to say it was a total desert, but that was less prevalent. And so this group of folk were like, right, well, let's create those opportunities. And that's how Loud Poets was born, with the simple name being like, right, this is loud, this is dynamic, this is embodied, this is fun. And the idea from the start was, this should be a fun Friday night out, right? This should be our sort of slogan is like fist thumping, pint drinking, side tickling, heart rending. It's changed over the years, but
hey, you have a thing. I don't have a tagline for Process. No, I need to. It can't be Tyrone, because as Kayla will keep reminding me, Process is more than just me now.
This is true. Kayla.
Like, I think I stole Trust the Process from Joel Embiid.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
And
Trust the Process.
Properly like, this is Joel Embiid and Philadelphia's catchphrase. I'm stealing that for me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep hashtagging a couple of things as Trust the Process. It's going to be
it.
shit for the algorithm, but that was not the thought process.
No.
But no.
You should trust the thought process. I'm enjoying these fourth wall breaks way too much.
No, on our Instagram post, because Kayla made a joke about it, I keep tagging all our Instagram posts of the oral tradition. Because that's what's making weddings. It's the oral tradition.
It is. It's the oral tradition. I don't know what we're laughing about here. Where was I? Yeah. So that basically, my potted history is getting long. That's how it started. And I mean, that first night sold out an 180 seat theater. It was really successful. So we started doing more and more. I wasn't there for the first sort of year. I came on board when I moved to Edinburgh in September of 2014. But at that point, it was very much a collective. It was a group of uni students and sort of young professionals in their early to mid 20s who were just interested in creating this thing. And it grew and developed from there. So we had our monthly nights. We did a first Fringe run in 2014, which was really successful. And we just started building and we started getting in bigger names. We expanded to Glasgow. But for the first several years, we didn't have any funding. So it was all off of ticket sales. It was a lot of putting in our own money. Like, tours are incredibly expensive. But we were trying to make it, so that it would be a worthwhile thing for the folk involved, so that they were getting something positive out of it. Because there were a range of different interests and motivations in the collective at that time. And it was a large group of people. We were working with a 5-person band, plus we were like 4 or 5 poets. We had folk who were interested in video production and audio production, right? So all of these different creative disciplines. And that's really, I think, the strength of a collective is getting to sort of have this melting pot of different ideas and inspiration points and support each other through that. And then we just we kept evolving. So it became clear at a certain point where we're like, okay, we should, probably incorporate in some way. We'd been going for several years at that point, and just to have a profile on Company's House and to be someone who seemed like a safe pair of hands for funders. So we incorporated as a limited company. And then last year we shifted. So we're now a CIC, a community interest company, which actually fits us a lot better because as a limited company, we weren't taking dividends or anything. Like, it's not like we were like, we must provide for our shareholders. We're like, no, we are a community interest company. Our primary focus is supporting and developing the Scottish spoken word scene, its poets and its producers and its audiences, and keeping that form alive. But yeah, the makeup of the team has changed over time. People have come, people have gone. And we've really been so lucky to have so many just incredible talents working with us over the years. We've worked with so many different poets as well. And what is the difference between Loud Poets and I Am Loud? So, because it was when we incorporated, at that time, we were sort of working with, we increasingly were doing film work. and increasingly doing it for other clients. And this is true now as well. So like we will film fringe shows, we'll film, we'll make bespoke music videos and stuff like that. And actually, when we were getting in requests for film work, being like, wait, so Loud Poets are going to film an ad for me? Like it just wasn't making sense. We were like, okay, I am loud was always our hashtag. And we're like, okay, it's I Am Loud, but then it's got branches underneath it. So we've got Loud Poets, we've got Loud Film. We had Loud Comedy for a time, and that's sort of come away now, potentially might come back. But that allows us to sort of emphasize the breadth of what we do, that obviously our primary focus is poetry, but we are also a production house that is capable of supporting a number of different creative interests. And we've always been really interested in combining them, in working with music and working with film, in bringing all of those things together. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, so like one of the things I wanted definitely to pick up on with the whole collective idea, as well as that idea of so many collectives that either I have known of or at least slightly been a part of. The biggest thing was keeping people involved in it. And I say involved in it as much as because we've all got so many hats on, so many things in our lives.
Yeah.
People will come in and out of it. So how is it that challenge of like keeping the collective still there, but even with people coming in and out and keeping that still same mission statement from the start, or even level of, I think the mission statement has changed now.
Yeah.
So how is navigating that?
Yeah, not always easy is the honest answer. I think a lot of the work in keeping a collective or any sort of group of artists together alive is recognizing that there will be a range of motivations for why people are participating, and not trying to force people into something that actually doesn't match what they want to do. So if you have someone who, we had people from the beginning where some of them were like, I want this to be my full-time job. Like, I want to be a full-time spoken word poet or a full-time musician or video editor. And like, that is my passion. And I want to work on my career and develop my career through this thing, or I want this thing to be my career.
Is there a difference between people that like keeping it together for like the business side of it, and like what point does it change? Do you have to have like someone consistent throughout all of it? Or I mean, because the whole thing of I don't want to do Ship of Theseus.
Yeah, but that can be a huge part. Yeah, because I mean, all of our membership pretty much has evolved except for Kev. And I do think that there is maybe something to be said for like one person who, or like a couple of core folk who are tenacious and stubborn as hell, and like I will not go down with this ship. I will keep this ship afloat. And who are really invested in it in that way. And like, obviously we've had so many incredibly invested people. I'm not saying that LP exists because of Kev, but there is certainly something to be said for, that kind of stubbornness. And I think when you talk about the business side as well, it's having folk who are willing to sort of make the jump to full time, which is incredibly precarious and scary. Like, but then you hit a threshold with how much you can do while you are also working full time. And we were all working full time when it started, and we sort of hit a limit with going like, okay, well, we are at max capacity. We are doing everything that we possibly can. So if we want this to continue to evolve, if we want this to get bigger, someone's going to have to take the leap. And Kev went first, and then slowly folk followed or went off to pursue other things, or decided, actually, I want to stay in full-time work. I'm not really interested in this being my full-time job, which is completely legitimate. And I think it's understanding where everyone's at and what they want to be doing, and not trying to be like, oh no, if you want to be part of this at all, you must be on full-time. Like, no, there's different ways of being engaged in it.
Like in terms of making that jump again, from, especially in terms of making the jump in general, that idea of like, is where as we almost talked about beforehand, the idea of is it even a collective? Where does that line between collective and I guess almost business come into it, and like what's changed? Because obviously with that, you guys will still have projects and things you do together. You'll have a couple. You'll still do a group home and all that kind of stuff. So working together as a group, but then it becomes a business, and like with that as well, how much of it is the nights versus what we're doing, and is the separation between that?
Yeah, and it's a hard question to answer, because especially now, our business is made up of multiple strands. We have our funded seasons, which are supported by Creative Scotland. We started getting funding in 2020 after multiple failed applications, and we're really, really grateful to have that kind of support now. That covers some of our programming, but not all of our programming, right? So it covers like our showcases and our slams and a lot of our digital production, but like we don't have funding for our open mic and stuff. And so we're always trying to think of where the gaps are in terms of development and performance opportunities and how to fill them. But then, when it sort of comes to the collective, the workload changes as you're a business. Like we need accounting work, we are now sort of again hitting limits of capacity and going, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean, bringing more folk on board, or does that mean streamlining what we do? And it is challenging. It is challenging to be a creative person in this economy. It is challenging to make your living from creative pursuits in this economy, and in this sort of, not to go on my soapbox, but like capitalist system which discourages you from making your own way and having that precarity. So I mean, I think it's interesting because I don't know if I would call us a collective at this point. We're a team of directors who have equal say in how our business, our company is run. But then I suppose I would say we are a company with a broader community. Because it's funny, we get asked sometimes like, oh, I've done your gigs. Am I a loud poet? And I'm like, hell yeah, you're a loud poet. Like, it is, I suppose, a brand, but it's more so an acknowledgement of, okay, we're trying to emphasize that like spoken word is a beautiful thing. And if this is what you are interested in, like get on board, come to our shows, like see how you can get involved. It's not just because we have incorporated as a company doesn't mean that sort of collective energy is not still really present in what we do.
I was finding it amusing last year because I was working with the Albany Theatre in Deptford last year a lot, and one of the things we were talking over was I was looking at like how to take things further, and part of that would have been going into like looking into funding, etc. But one of the conversations I was having with the person that was running the course there, or not the course, running the program there, was whilst it's good to look for the funding, ultimately a thing of I've been doing as much as I have been doing as is so far, and do I actually need to add on this extra funding thing? Not to say that I should only ever be at this level, but it was an idea of like, you've been doing all these projects on your own as is, so do you need the extra jump? So with that, I guess that question of what was it for you guys? I mean, I even touched on it beforehand, but like, what was it for you guys? Like, no, we need to do this rather than this, and almost like, I know it wasn't necessarily stop being a collective, but like, what was there like a changing moment kind of thing? And like with that, like not regrets, but like, do you kind of miss the collective thing versus the, I guess, more business side of things?
That's a great question. I mean, to the latter, like, yes, there are times, because you look back on the photos from our early tours when we were doing Brighton and Prague, and you're like, oh, we were just a bunch of chaos numpties who were just like,
doing the fun side of it, that everyone sees on Instagram and socials, etc.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, like, that there was so much joy in that and in sort of being this more ragtag group. But at the same time, it's like, okay, then there's the stuff that we're not posting on Instagram. Like, we're not getting paid for it. We ensured that the company could cover those core costs. So if we're asking an artist to tour with us to Prague, that is not coming out of their pocket. But the labor that we are doing is not covered. So it becomes a lot of work. It can be exhausting. It could be exhausting. And I think there's only so long that you can do a labor of love. And that was really or you can keep doing it, but your life will not allow you to keep doing it, right? And we hit that ceiling, and I think that was really the transition of going, we have these massive ambitions, we know what we want to do, but right now we were selling out our shows. Like we were outgrowing our theaters, we were selling out our shows, but we were paying artists as much as we possibly could. But you're like, well, we can't attract big names if we can only give them 30 quid. Like we were not able to be in accessible theaters because in Edinburgh, it's really difficult to find accessible theaters.
Everywhere, it's hard to find accessible
places. Everywhere,
places.
it's hard. Exactly. And so they charge a premium, and understandably. And so we were going, no, but we want this accessibility. We want to be fairly paying our artists. We need to be paying ourselves if we're going to go further. And so it really became essential. And it was hard for us because we applied 4 times between 2016 or 2017 and 2020 and got rejected every single time. And we sort of were hitting the end of our rope of going, well, we are selling out our shows. We know that this has value, but how can we sustain this? And it was only when the pandemic hit that we then applied for a completely different project called Return to Form, which was totally digital. And we did get funding for that. And it was sort of almost the bittersweet thing of, oh, thank Christ, we can do this. Here's a bit of forward momentum. Let's carry on. And also being like, we're a live spoken word company and we haven't gotten funding for any of our seasons, but as soon as we do something digital, but then luckily we did get funding for our seasons.
Actually, on this, and I'm almost going back to your soapbox as well with the whole capitalism side of things with this.
Yeah.
My view of looking at some of the spoken word nights in London and how things are going is they found nice space, and they found nice spaces, they found nice ways of going. I mean, I'm looking at Process. We have found a nice groove of things. So with you guys selling out stuff, that line and balance between this is working, you just keep this going, but then also we want more. Like finding that, because I think a lot of poetry nights, Boomerang for the longest time, I don't say fell into the trap, that sounds wrong. But no, probably did.
Fall into the
trap of like, we're just doing this. Yeah. And there's the fact that, especially looking at the open mic landscape in London at the very least, if not the UK, but I know London more. Yeah. We went on for 7 years as Boomerang. There's very few nights that have been on as consistently for longevity. That length of time. And the large reason that we stopped going was the pandemic. So it wasn't so I think there was definitely something to be said for this is fine. Yeah. And not to say don't go for the best thing, but like we've got a thing that works. So with you and Lad Poets, there was like obviously the challenge of like you had a thing that worked. Yeah. Was there a temptation of like, well, this just works. Can we just keep that going? Yeah. Like, or was it a thing of like, no, we are, because like with that, was it a case of we are just about keeping it together kind of thing, or was it a level of we want more?
I think it was always we want more, and I think that is because the folk involved were and still are just pie in the sky, ambitious, like 10-year plan, we're going to take over the world kind of people, which can be a lot sometimes. I mean, I remember when, Kev was pitching, we should do Prague Fringe. And I was like, how are we going to make this work? But we did. And it was incredible. And it led to opportunities. We've done some ridiculous shows. We've tested out things that had a high chance of failure. And some of them were probably silly things to do, but it's that innovation which has been so valuable. And so, I can absolutely see that energy of, okay, let's not rock the boat. Let's be a safe pair of hands. Let's do things that are gonna make us consistent.
So I always add to that as well, not to put words, but especially given the scene in Edinburgh when there aren't as many nights, etc. Almost the burden of, but Edinburgh needs a night sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that's been huge as well. And I think increasingly now, actually, because in the last 2-3 years, we've expanded nationally. Because before we did have a night in Glasgow, but then we wrapped that up in, I want to say 2018, 2019. and then due again to sort of lack of resources and venue stuff. And so it then became, okay, let's look at our national scene, because Edinburgh is actually fairly, I don't want to say well served, because there aren't the sort of higher paid opportunities all the time, but there are a lot of open mics. If you're a poet in Edinburgh, there are more resources and more opportunities. But the Scottish scene writ large, again, you have your grassroots nights dotted all over the place. But in terms of resourced opportunities, in terms of professional level supported opportunities, there aren't a lot of them. And so we saw this real need, and we were like, okay, how do we meet that? And again, that is something that did require funding, because as soon as you bring in touring, as soon as you bring in traveling, and it was really important as well to us to bring up not just, do a show in different parts of Scotland, but bring up acts from across the rest of the UK and sort of cross-pollinate those scenes. I mean, you did a gig for us up in Aberdeen last year, 2 years ago?
Yeah, last year.
And that is so incredibly valuable to then be like, not just so that folks in Aberdeen can see you and get that chance to see one of the, best spoken worders in the UK. Yes. But also so that you can see Aberdeen and be like, oh, damn, there's a lot of great folk here. And you bring that back as a poet and as a promoter, and so that we are more aware of what is happening. Because I mean, it's a tangent, but like, in Scotland, we've got a bit of a chip on our shoulder where we're like, there's not a lot of cross-pollination that happens across the border. And a lot of folk maybe have this idea in their head subconsciously of like, oh, Edinburgh exists in August. But then the rest of the year, you're like, so coming back to that point of like meeting the need, that has always really been at the core. And we have these sort of more creative ideas and things where we're pushing the envelope of what spoken word can be. And we're also at the same time trying to identify what's needed. Like we started our open mic after the, I think in early 2021, and it was oversubscribed so quickly. It's just kept growing and growing, because we're like, well, there is clearly a need here. So it's finding that balance between doing crazy stuff and meeting need. And they can be part and parcel really a lot of the time too.
I'm still going to try to wrap up the collective talk soon, but I also do, it would be a failing of me if I have you on here and I don't talk about the PhD as well at some point as well. But before I go into a very brief, I say brief, we'll see how brief it goes, brief PhD talk, to wrap up the collective side of things and to go back to almost, I guess, the roots of Loud Poets and you joining Loud Poets. Obviously, collectives aren't done things so often. Like they're not the majorly popular things, but I think people all are aware that they exist, but they're not common is the word I was looking for. Jesus Christ, Tara. I forgot the word common.
Words.
Yeah, cool. Collectives aren't a common thing. That's a better. Collectives aren't a common thing. What was it that kind of made you guys want to do this, or made you want to be a part of a collective, and why should people or why shouldn't people be part of collectives?
Yeah. I mean, I think what really attracted me was just this group of folk who were so creative and had so much energy and were trying to make a change and trying to build this scene. I loved that. I really glomfed onto them quite quickly and was like, hello, can I do the door? Can I sell merch? Can I do the gigs? And wouldn't leave. 10 years later, here we are. But I think that the real value in it, I mean, again, going back, so much of your life as a creative in this economy and this society is solo, especially with spoken word. It's different from theater, where often you are working with a company or a cast or a production crew, right? So much of spoken word is just solo doing gigs and developing your work alone. And there is merit to that. There's absolutely value to that, having total creative control. But being part of a collective means, I think it's two big things, which are sort of that having access to all of those different diverse creative ideas and perspectives, but also having a sense of support and security, which is huge, especially if there's not funding, especially if something is under-resourced. If you're running a night alone and you're ill, well, or if you're gigging alone and you're ill, well, then there goes your money, there goes your opportunity, right? And so being part of a collective has meant we cover each other, we support each other, both in terms of logistics and in terms of creativity. So I know if I have a poem, I run it by the team. Like I get their perspective on it. I have that support inbuilt, and that has been just fundamental to my life as an artist.
I need to talk to Kev about setting up a collective called the Fabulous Freebirds, and we just all do the Freebird rule.
Yes, please.
Wrestling reference, people.
Yes, please. That scrap. I am loud. That's over. We're doing this now. Yeah. And it's like, it's interesting because I'm just thinking back to what we were talking about before in the timeline section where I was like, oh, wanting to invest more in my own work. But I'm equally so fundamentally aware that like I would not be where I am creatively if I had not gone through the crucible, but the supportive, wonderful crucible of having this community and having this support. Burnout is so common, just exhaustion and frustration with our scene is so common. And I feel incredibly blessed that I have always had this community around me.
Nice. Well, just to kind of wrap up the Let's Talk About section, I do want to talk about the PhD.
Going from collective work to me alone at the kitchen table
seamless
screaming.
Transitions here that'll be completely fine to edit for the podcast. I think, as I can joke about, I think what I reference, I feel like I reference Loud Poets a fair bit in that thing of you guys are a substantial collective and looking at the stuff I do for Process. There's very few people and things I can point to that are even slightly similar. It's like, but look at what Loud Poets doing. Like, obviously, it's not exactly one for one, but like, cool, they're doing good stuff, and people are looking for like good resources, especially that are accessible.
Yeah,
cool. Online stuff. There's online shit here.
Yes.
So look, I point to Loud Poets for that, but I also a lot of times will point to your PhD in the idea of like when people want to know more about spoken word, it's like, oh well, Katie Ailes has done a PhD in spoken word, and there's obviously not many people that have done that. Trying to point to that. So for people, so I'd have to explain it all the time. What is your PhD actually about?
Speed run, 2 minutes. No, maybe time me. No, it's essentially what it came out of was me being a spoken word poet and looking at the scene and seeing journalism or seeing criticism of spoken word, which sort of used a lot of language around, oh, it's so real, it's so raw, it's so authentic, it's so emotional. They're speaking their truths, right? And that not entirely squaring with my own experience of, oh, there's a lot of work that I'm putting into this. This is crafted. There's the whole writing process. There's the editing process. There is the preparation for performance and rehearsal. There's often memorization. For me, I choreograph the gestures that I'm using in the poem. And so there is a lot of work that goes into a product, which our hope is that it seems unchoreographed and unscripted, and that it seems authentic in this moment, right? And my curiosity around that, and my PhD looked at the concept of authenticity in spoken word, and it broke it down into 10 different subcategories, which I won't fully go into, but I interviewed 70 poets across the UK, and I was asking them things like, is your work autobiographical? Is it true? Is it emotionally true? If you are emoting sad on stage, do you actually have to be sad? Do you have to be connecting with the emotions in the poem? Or is there a level of acting, right?
I will forever enjoy the look on your face when we did the interview for this, because as with any recording thing, to test out your recording thing, the general go-to thing is, oh, what did you have for breakfast and all that? Because that was whilst I was in Edinburgh for Fringe and I was living the life I do, what did you have for breakfast, Tyrone?
A whole bucket of popcorn.
And a large drink, because I went cinema first. So my breakfast was popcorn and a drink.
We'll never forget
the look
that.
of, I don't know if it was disgust or what on Katie's face, but the look of like, I was not expecting that answer.
The best thing was, because I asked that question of everyone, and like, poets are just chaos. Because I was like, oh, this will be a good mic check. Everyone eats breakfast. Most people don't eat breakfast. Most people were like, oh, I had an entire bucket of, you were the only one with that particular answer. But it was terrible as a mic test because some people were just like, nothing. I was like, can you elaborate on the nothing so I can get my levels? Oh man. But yeah, that was the thrust of it. Basically looking at this concept of sort of reality and authenticity, and really trying to emphasize the crafted nature of the work, and also how authenticity is a really dangerous concept to use as a critical yardstick, because, you know, it implies that something has not taken craft. It implies that something is just natural and raw and real, which is dismissive of the work that goes into it. But also the idea of authenticity has massive sort of gender and racial and ableist connotations, right? We see certain identities as more naturally real and cool than others, and that places massive pressure on those poets. And you end up getting, a lot of really nasty, particularly a lot of racism in the notion of authenticity. So I was trying to break down those sorts of ideas and look at those and try to evolve towards a critical model of spoken word where it's actually looking at the craft behind spoken word rather than just going, oh, wow, that person was raw. Good job. And you're like, right, okay, can we actually look at the craft?
Things to ask before I forget. If anyone wants to engage with the PhD at the moment, where can they engage with it?
So the whole thing is online for free. It's 130,000 words, so it's a bit of a read.
I know a lot of people that like reading. I feel like if I can. Kayla would be someone I feel that would definitely read the hell out of that. They totally would. But no, yeah. So yeah, if people want to find it, where? Yeah,
it's if you go to my website, one of the little tabs will have it linked. There's probably, you can skip my methodology section because that's a lot. But yeah, that I tried to write it in a way that would be relatively accessible and readable while also, maintaining to the standards of a PhD, because it's really important to me that it not just be something that gathers dust in a cupboard somewhere, that it actually be of use to the community that inspired it and that informed it through these interviews. I've done a few sort of more in-depth podcasts about it. Obviously, we're sort of touching on it here as part of a wider podcast. But I did an episode with PJ, Repeat Beat Poet. I did one with Kev for our Loudcast. So I think those are both linked on my website as well, where I get more deeply into the ideas behind it. And I also have an essay in spoken word in the UK, which is the first big academic guide to that in the UK, put together by Lucy English and Jack McGowan. Fantastic resource. Would highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in sort of looking at the academic side or just the critical side of spoken word in the UK and the history of it as well. So those would be a few starting places. If folk want to engage with it.
No, kind of, as we're wrapping up this section as well now, like one of the things I am aware that one of the main takeaways I definitely took from your PhD was the whole, when you were coming up with the idea of like having to define what spoken word was, which was
oh my days,
a whole thing. And like
nightmare.
I especially doing the documentaries and talking and telling people about it, I've definitely kind of paraphrased but borrowed your take on what spoken word is, because like memory serves, spoken word you were defining as like writing with the intention to be spoken out loud at some point. Doesn't mean it's only going to be spoken out loud, but and I've definitely taken that away from this. Like for you, like obviously so many words in the whole PhD, but what was like one of your biggest takeaways from doing the whole PhD? Casually wants to put on the spot that I did not prep you for.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting points, because it was fascinating doing this sort of critical study for an art form where I am also an artist. And I actually recorded an interview with myself early in the process, which won't be part of because all of the interviews are going to be part of a public archive. There's been delays around creating that. But that is the hope, to get that up and running at some point. I recorded an interview with myself to be aware of my own practices and my own biases in a way, and my own assumptions, because there were some things where I went in going, oh, well, I think everyone does that. One of the things that I suppose where there was the most deviation and the most difference across the scene was around emotional performance. Where, so you take a poem where someone is crying on stage, right? And there would be some people who would say, okay, or rather discarding that, like, I was asking the question, how emotionally present do you need to be? There were some people who would say, I need to be feeling it. I need to, okay, if I'm going to be performing this poem about my brother dying, I need to remember him. That is the only way to do this justice, right? To not be thinking about it, to put on any sort of emotional affect that I'm not feeling right now is inauthentic and actually disingenuous and strays into morality and ethics. And they would frame it in that way, that sort of camp of spoken word is not acting, right? So you would get those folk. And then you would get folk who would say, actually, for me, I need to protect myself as a performer. And in order to do that, if I'm doing this poem about my brother dying, I can't think about him. I have to go into absolute performer mode. I need to be safe. So any emotional affect that I have will be put on, because if I actually accessed those feelings, I couldn't do the poem. I couldn't be on stage and I couldn't hold my audience safely. And just the difference between those things, I just found so interesting. And I think where I fall is different in every performance. I love the moments where I can be present on stage, fully emotionally accessing what I'm doing. But it takes a hell of a lot of work to get there, and it takes a hell of a lot of skill and craft to actually feel safe accessing those emotions. And often it takes a lot of time and a lot of distance. So that was one of the, perhaps not sort of takeaways or lessons, but understandings about the diversity of our scene and how different people will define their craft and the level of presence and rawness that they can bring to it quite differently depending on what kind of performer they are.
Well, going from this very informative chat, we are now going to go to our last section, which is going to be very informal and very... I'm sticking with haphazard. That's my word of the day, apparently.
Haphazard's a good word.
We are now going to go to my slow fire questions section. We get into our last section known as slow fire questions. This is one of the ones I actually do have a vague intro for, in that we've got the concept known as quickfire questions. If you've hopefully watched the other stuff that Process does, you've seen quickfire questions. I'll ask people as many questions as I can in like 3 minutes, and sometimes those questions need more time, I feel. Not all the questions, but that's the fun of doing this. So we're going to be doing slow fire questions. We're going to aim for 5 questions and see how it goes. So, Katie, can you give me a random number in between 1 and 100, please?
74.
Then we are starting off with, what is your musical guilty pleasure?
Ooh. See, I'm weird with music. I'll listen to anything. But the thing that comes to mind the most is I'm not going to say I am a runner. I occasionally run. And when I do, I've got a running playlist. And it has a lot of like songs that were big hits when I was sort of in high school. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of Sean Paul. Oh yeah. And music where I'm listening and I'm running and I'm super motivated. And then you listen to the lyrics and you're like, bitch, get on the floor. Let me slap that ass. And I'm like, oh, this is a bop. Oh, not a fan of the lyrics. Oh, don't know how to feel. Just keep going.
I was literally having this conversation with my friend Derek the other day. So we were watching a Billy Talent gig, which already sets the interesting tone there. And we were having a talk about the band Theory of a Dead Man. They were around the same time Billy Talent came out. They're still around today, but like one of their songs is The Bitch Came Back. And it's always that thing of like, when listening to it to myself, I actively view it through a satirical element.
Yeah.
Because that makes like, it's hilarious if you view it through a satirical element, but also that thing of like, but are they being satirical?
Yeah.
Because if they're being serious, this is a really bad song.
And you're singing along with it like, am I the bad guy?
Well, yeah, I like they've got some other songs that you can clearly tell are serious, and like because they had the whole song I hate my life, and like they were listing things like things they hate in life, etc.
Yeah.
And like some of them were like, these all feel like you're making a big deal out of a small thing. So there's level, okay, cool, this feels satirical.
Yep.
But also one of the lines in I hate my life is, and I just hate when a girl's underage. And it's like, if this is all satirical and you're making fun of awful men, this is hilarious.
Yep.
If you're not being satirical,
you're not.
It's like, I don't know, and I've not had it confirmed yet.
Yeah.
I'm going off that vibe of they've been around long enough that if it was serious,
Like, surely someone would have
cancelled them properly by now.
Yeah.
So it must be satirical.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of music that makes me run fast and question my own feminism.
Does that mean we have a Robin Thicke in there somewhere?
Genuinely, Blurred Lines used to be on the playlist, and then I was like, I can't.
There was a limit. There was a line.
There's a line. Yeah, it's a blurred line. I always go to like Kesha Timber, which is not that bad, but there is a line in it where she's like, it's not her, Sean Paul.
No, that's Pitbull. That's Pitbull.
Oh, that's Pitbull. That's not Sean Paul.
That's Mr. Worldwide.
That's
Mr. Worldwide.
Love me some Mr. Worldwide. But there's she says she won't, but I bet she will.
Yeah.
And it's just me running along like,
she will. Timber.
She going down. Oh. So yeah, I guess guilty.
Yeah.
I am a fan of equal rights and against misogyny.
Oh, I'm going on the tangents here, but pointing to equal rights. Have you seen the film Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping?
No, but that sounds excellent.
Lonely Island's film.
Yes.
There is a wonderful parody song in that with Pink as a guest star called Equal Rights.
I have, yeah.
I'm not gay, but if I were, I would want equal rights.
Yep. Absolute bop. I did a big Lonely Island binge a little while ago when I was in the thick of a funding application and losing my mind. Beautiful.
Beautiful. And that one actually is satirical.
There's the three-way song with Lady
it's
Gaga.
Not gay, but
it's not gay if it's in a three-way. And I'm just like, has this aged badly or was it always? But yeah.
So to wrap up this question, Kayla does the playlist for Process, and we've been changing it up each time, etc. Yeah. There's a song we've left in the playlist, and I don't remember why we've left it on. I don't remember when we put it on, but it's now become so bad we have to leave it on because I find it hilarious. In the going with Lonely Island, we've still got Mother Lover on the playlist.
Oh, it's so good.
But
it's so good.
And this is where I swear, I don't remember when we put it on, but I feel like I remember that song coming on the first Process after Mum passed away.
I mean, great
which
timing.
Was
really
which was yeah, and I think I found it so hilarious. Like it's not we must change the song now, gonna feel a type of way. This is no, we keep this.
No, we're keeping that.
This is yes.
The music video is exquisite because they got Susan Sarandon for it. And I think it's Laura Linney
That's
as
the
well.
SNL money there.
It really is. That's the Justin Timberlake money.
Give me another number, please, because before I get going on too many tangents.
29.
29, then we are going for... Do you have a TV in your room?
No.
You much of a TV person?
So no. More now. My parents, we didn't have we had a TV, but we weren't TV people. It was never like I grew up not watching TV at all, aside from occasionally like my dad would watch some sports, and he does more now, but the TV was not a thing. So I remember like I got a bit of Sesame Street when I was really young, but then we never had cable or anything like that. And so it just wasn't a part of my normal day or existence at all. Certainly not watching it with family. So I'd go to friends' houses and like SpongeBob would be on and I'd be like I didn't understand. I missed all of those cultural references. I never watched The Simpsons. So things that everyone else understood, I just completely didn't get. And I don't, there were downsides to that. I was a colossal nerd. But I did a ton of reading. I had a really rich childhood in many ways. Not to say that you can't have that with TV, obviously. But it wasn't really experienced as a loss. Then when I got like a laptop when I was sort of later in high school, I remember I started watching House and stuff. Like I found ways that you could watch TV on your laptop. Crazy. But yeah, it was never really a thing for me growing up. But now, oh my days, like now, love TV shows. And yeah, but no TV in my room. But although I suppose it's a bit different now because you're like with the Netflixification of streaming.
I have a TV in my room, but I'm very aware part of having a TV in my room is just, it's an easier way to watch Netflix in bed than having to
exactly.
I've got, especially given my setup at home, I don't want to have to keep moving my laptop room to room, especially when I've got it set up as like my editing workstation.
Yeah.
Leave it there.
Yeah.
So therefore TV, I want to watch the Netflix, but I don't want to watch it on my phone. So TV, I'm not saying I bought a TV just for Netflix. That would be stupid. But that idea of I need to, another number, please.
Yeah. 4.
We are going with, interesting.
No.
Do you like button poetry?
I feel like I'm going to have, it's like the academic hat, should it go on or off? I massively value button poetry for the work that they've done in creating this sort of archive of the US scene. I know that they have experienced a lot of dissent and controversy in their community about sort of how resources are shared and how those decisions are made. I don't know a huge amount about that, so I can't really comment on it. If the question is if I like the style that has become associated with button poetry, I think I value where I see folk innovating within that style. There are a lot of poems on Button's channels where I'm like, oh, you have taken these tropes and you have reversed them. You have taken them and you've done something fascinating with them. I think like any sort of mainstream publisher, obviously a lot of that work has become cliche, has become rote, has become, dear Mr. President, and they have become almost a victim of their own success in that way. But I think certainly for me, and certainly in my sort of academic work, it's a treasure trove. It's such an incredible resource that they have created.
I think it's often looked over that whilst button poetry is this more mainstream platform for poetry, like they put out, I believe it's still, they put out a video a day.
It's incredible how much work they're producing.
But like with that as well, not like a lot of the videos don't get views. I mean, like, they get views, but they don't get like, most of their videos will be around the 1K mark, which for, again, if all the process videos are around 1K, we're fucking loving that.
This video, 1K, do it.
Challenge, you're getting, but like, if the process videos are around that, I'd be loving that.
Yeah,
but like,
yeah.
I think the button poetry stuff are definitely a little bit skewed because they have like the 20 videos that have over 1 million or whatever, but most of their videos aren't the shared, aren't the memed, not memed, aren't the viral, sometimes memes, but yeah.
And I think it's worth keeping in mind as well, whenever we criticize Button, like they don't have control over what goes viral. And so often what goes viral is work which is trauma-based, is issues-based, is, I don't want to say clickbaity because I don't think that the poems are, but the titles or the descriptions in some way fall into that. So it lends itself, just like, the algorithm for slams and what does well, it ends up being this often quite heavy, quite shouty work, which is more likely to cross over into mainstream. But I not every poem on the channel is that. And I see the breadth of what they're producing.
It's also the thing I have to remember about button poetry. Whilst yes, they do have some level of publishing things, some choose who to publish, etc. Ultimately, they're going to events. The thing has to happen. Like
exactly,
it would be different if button poetry were like a studio-based thing, inviting people in.
Exactly,
but they're just filming what's happening. Obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of it in terms of how much is it advertised that button poetry is going to be at your event or whatever.
Yeah,
if that changes what the poems you're going to be doing, but they are just, if the poem never happened, they can't
And certainly early on, like I don't know how much their model has changed and what it is now, but certainly early on, you know, that's them going to Cupsy, that's them going to these sort of, college and university slams and things and sort of, just seeing what they pick up. So, I think broadly my sense with button poetry is appreciation. And as well, the fact that that's how I got exposed to spoken word. It was, you know, seeing again, Katie Worsing and Andrea Gibson and Neil Hilborn on their channel and going, oh, holy hell. And then seeing those poets in person and all of that sort of evolving from there. So yeah, more positive than negative, I think.
Give me another number, please.
91.
Then we are going with favorite song.
Skater Boy by Avril Lavigne. Genuinely, I started saying that before even thinking about the context of our history with this song.
My favorite workshop tool.
For folks who aren't aware.
So the full story behind this is I don't do that many workshops. All the poetry I don't do that many workshops. And when I was first starting to do workshops, I was trying to think of like, what is my unique workshop thing? Like, so much of what I've been doing has been taken from other people doing workshops. What's my thing? Oh, I love the idea of specificity. That's a thing I really like in poetry, which is where part of my references come from in here is an actual thing to latch it to. And I also am a big Avril Lavigne fan. So one of my workshop challenges was taking that first part of Avril Lavigne's song, He Was a Boy, She Was a Girl, kind of make it any more obvious. And like, yes, you can. Make it more obvious.
Yeah.
There is your challenge.
It's a great prompt. Yeah.
And then, with you guys on your Patreon, there was one stage when it's like, if you are on this certain level of perk, you can give us a workshop thing. And I saw my dance and I took it.
Brilliant. It was brilliant. Yeah, because it was when we were doing a series called Loud Poets Happy Hour, again, through lockdowns. And most other people, it was like, oh, coming of age poetry or monster poetry or science poetry. And then yours was Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy poetry. And I was like, yes. But it was actually such a perfect prompt because then what we turned it into was writing poetry about pop culture. And that was something that I was less familiar with. Again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, like sort of comedic poetry and poetry which engages more with pop culture is something I am less familiar with.
And that's actually where I got the poem Monica from, because you mentioned the Monica Howlin' Bird poem. And it's like, I've got that from that. And I've then gone on to go like, friends, you need to see this one. Like, people need to, like, I literally had two friends over the other day that like, oh, you would like this poem, etc. This is because like they were talking about like, oh, because one of them had some poems about like Bon Jovi, etc.
Yeah,
the thing is like making poems about like irrelevant stuff. It's like, no, it's good.
No,
do that.
It's good. It is so important. And I think especially like brief tangent, but we do so much educational work where we're working with students and their eyes glaze over when you say poetry because it's not about things that are in their life and relevant to them. And so I'm like, no, write your poems about Bon Jovi, write your poems about Avril Lavigne. Like, that is vital. There's a poem that I also mentioned in that workshop called Marge Simpson by Raphael Bob Waxberg. Yeah. And it's an incredible, it was a Twitter thread initially, but it can be read as a poem. And so I, long tangent to say, Avril Lavigne, Skater Boy. I mean, there's other probably, that is up there. There's this singer-songwriter called Dar Williams, and her song "As Cool as I Am" is probably like the closest to my heart favorite song. But love me some Avril. Love me some Avril.
And now our last number in question.
30.
Do you listen to podcasts? The meta one.
I'll listen to this one. I probably won't. Listening to my own voice as hell. I listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot of news podcasts. So a lot of American news podcasts just to sort of stay current on that. Although that's somewhat depressing right now. More like UK news podcasts, Navarro media podcasts and stuff like that. I listen to there's a podcast called Myths and Legends, which I love, which is retellings of myths and legends from around the world. Yeah. A lot of NPR because I'm a little NPR baby. So, yeah.
Is the Loudcast gonna be doing much in the future?
Yeah, we're hoping to. We've got various plans to bring it back in different ways. It was we had a funding application that included it, and then unfortunately it got rejected, so we had to reshape it, and the Loudcast didn't end up being a part of what we did get funding for. But we're hoping to bring it back because these sorts of conversations are so valuable. Like I endlessly admire the work that you do, and I'm not just saying that because we're on camera and I'm your guest, but the spoken word scene has often lacked this sort of discourse, right? It lacks public opportunities for people to talk about their practice, to talk about their craft, to talk about their organizational and promotional work, and to learn about the scene. And for those sorts of conversations to be archived in a sustainable way is just absolutely vital. And so you do all of that great work. Apples and Snakes has podcasts that they're doing. I know Dead Darlings and Lunar does great stuff or was doing great stuff. So there's so many different people who are making that sort of patchwork. And that's what we've tried to do with the Loudcast and with our various podcasts that have existed over the years. So yeah, I would say Loudcast has been on a bit of a hiatus. We've got plans to bring it back in different ways, and it's just figuring out the best way of doing that right now.
I think like the logistical stuff is the whole thing, and like
Yeah.
I am very aware. I've made my own bed, and that because I've been doing this with the cameras and all of that vibe, I've kind of limited it somewhat to the can I get people around my house?
Yeah,
I want to try and figure out I physically can do some of the online stuff. There is just that inner creator in me. It's like, but I'm not going to do the high quality video podcast, and even though the YouTube does not get as many places as Spotify, but I like having that.
It's nice.
Thing. And then
it's
there's also the creator brain of me like, but I can then do clips from this, and the clips will look better from this.
Yep.
Then the idea that looking at how like content is, I hate the word content, but looking at how content is, but looking how like content is going, and you will have, here is the full podcast, and here is a set, but you come up with just a 10-minute clip.
Yep.
Like, no, that actually is really good though, because sometimes I do just want to hear that clip. That
exactly.
Again, it's like, I hate it, but it's like, it's actually really, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I get the logic behind it. So yeah. But yes, speaking of the content and whatnot, if people want to find any more content from you in the future, if they want to find you online, where could they find you? You have a camera there for them to talk.
Where can they find? Hello, beautiful people who want to follow me. No, that'd be lovely. Yeah, so my personal stuff is Katie Ailes, so Ailes is how the last name's spelled. I've got a website. I've got all the social media. Tyrone, there's too much social media. I don't have TikTok.
Same. No.
Because I mean, I have it, but I lurk and I don't. It's not.
I don't even have it.
I'm too old.
I don't even have it.
TikTok.
I can't. That was my line in my sand of like, there's get to the points in everyone's life when like, I can't keep up with all the things.
Yeah.
TikTok was my thing of like, not quite the I'm old now, but the I'm done.
Yeah.
I've kept up enough.
It's a lot. Yeah. So other than TikTok, I have all the other ones. But in terms of Loud Poets of I Am Loud, our website is iamloud.co, not com. There is no M. We get people all the time being like, your website doesn't work. And I'm like, it does. Or at I Am Loud Pro is our handle across social media. And we've got our YouTube channel and lots of other stuff. If you're ever up in Scotland, hit us up. We do poems. And we've got a writing club as well, which is multiple monthly sessions of workshops and feedback sessions and this sort of online community open to people who are in Scotland, but also further afield. It's fully digital. So if you're interested in joining a community like that, hit us up.
Perfect. As always, there'll be all the process links in the description, etc. I should put my guest links there, but that's extra effort, and I can't be bothered to do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
But again, I'm doing the effort of editing this podcast, and with that, I need to also edit the ending here, because I need to end the podcast here. So I'm going to end the podcast here in the same way I always do, which is stealing the words from my favourite Irishman, saying, I love you all, now fuck off. Goodbye, everyone.